In a world filled with conflict, in a universe comprised of differences, there's one thing that absolutely everything shares in common. We all exist. Including two guys named Jack and Michael, who like to chat about that very thing over a good cup of coffee. Let's pay them a visit, shall we?
Existence Brewing.
The girl from Ipanema's walking Oh, hey man, what's going on?
You're singing words. I thought this song was just like, I thought it was exclusively made for this coffee shop.
It was. It was the only package they could afford at the time. They were struggling baristas.
Was there any other kind of barista than the struggling kind? I was a barista for a while.
It's kind of like the unemployed actor.
You know what's funny, though, thinking back on it, is I was a barista way back when baristas first became a thing.
Really? You were a trend-setting barista?
Kind of, I guess. It was 1992. And it was like even before the big rise of Starbucks, but we got a coffee kiosk in the mall, and I started frequenting there as a customer first and got hooked on the stuff, and then found myself out of work and was like, this would be cool. I'd love to just hang out in the mall all day and make coffee and talk to people. And the owner was, he was a middle-aged man, so saying that he was sexist is kind of silly, and saying that he was, sort of I'm blanking on the word for a person who hates men, but anyway, he didn't want boys. He said no boys. He was only into teenage girls and college-age girls, but his wife wore him down for me over time, and eventually I was hired. So I worked there for a couple of years too. So it was neat. It was one of the best jobs I think I've ever had. I had a lot of fun. That was where I kind of discovered my gift for gabbing at people a little bit more. So, but anyway.
A wonderful gift of gab you have.
And I'm still a tortured barista there. What did you say? Struggling barista?
Struggling barista. Yeah, I believe that was the phrase.
So once a struggling barista, always a struggling barista, even 30 some odd years later.
So here's a question for you. Were coffee stands, or I guess, before the 90s, were they really a thing?
No, not like the latte. I remember it was still a pretty new concept even when I started working there. He, I imagine, got it a lot more than me, but these old timers, the guys that had been drinking diesel at the local cafe before they'd go out to work at the aluminum smelter or the gas works or something like that, they'd come kind of hobbling up and look at the board. And the first peer is like, what you got going on here? And then the second one is, what? I'm going to pay $3 for a cup of coffee. And then they'd mispronounce everything because it's this Italian deal. So I remember people saying that the espresso craze was just that it was going to pass, that it would never stick because there just aren't enough people that are willing to pay that much every day for a cup of coffee. And oh boy, were they wrong. Although Starbucks continues to report declining profits, it seems, and they're getting pushed hard by Dutch Bros, though, in our neck of the woods. The kids love Dutch Bros because they sell them all those guarana and all those high caffeine energy drink things that they're drinking now. Because we've gone beyond coffee with the kids. They Monster energy drink and all this other stuff. So yeah,
Dutch Bros is kind of like Hooters to people who frequent the baristas are used to Starbucks. I feel like they kind of took it to another level, and maybe not in the sex way, but they definitely took it to another level.
Yeah, they have their thing. I don't know what their big thing is. I quit the whole thing, a couple years ago, so it doesn't really matter to me. And I'm convinced Starbucks laces their beans with something that is turning, I have a full paranoia about their coffee now because it started to just give me weird, like, panic and stuff like that. I swear when I would drink their coffee, that's what it started doing to me. And then Dutch Bros, I just didn't care for very much. So, and then you mentioned Hooters. And so, of course, then you can go to the next level. This is probably truly where the pulse of those who will part with their money the easiest can be seen is the bikini barista stand. Because I believe it was either my brother or one of his friends who once said when they were all sitting around talking about going to the strip club, and it was just so wonderful to have to be a younger, be a boy listening to that at the time.
Yeah.
But one of them said something like, that's like being starving to death and going to watch a hamburger behind glass that you can't even touch, let alone eat. And it's just like, oh my
good.
God. So
every time my wife and I see a place like that, I always say, you know what? I bet they make a darn good cup of coffee.
Yeah, sure they do.
I'm sure that people who are going to those establishments aren't going there for the fine cup of coffee that you're receiving from the barista who just happens to be wearing tassels.
So I would hope that at least the patrons of the bikini barista stands are smart enough to figure out how to order something that takes an incredibly long time to make, since that will in fact extend the lifespan of what you're really paying to see.
Yeah. How much is a coffee at a bikini barista joint?
You're asking the wrong guy. I've never been.
And I've never seen a menu.
Yeah, I've never been before. I've seen plenty of them because kind of when they first rolled out, they initially had the look of, those shops, the sex stores and things from the street. It's almost like a house that's getting fumigated that they throw that canvas over.
Mm-hmm. And all the neighbors go, ooh.
Yeah, it's so nondescript that it stands out. It's just like it's supposed to be wearing a plain brown bag, but what it does is wind up making it look exactly like what it is, which is a place of some kind of, they always say ill refute, but I just think like there's, I don't know if refutes going on there, but ill, perhaps something ill to somebody's. Well, my ex-boss was a middle-aged man who was a misandrist. He didn't want boys working for him. I think I was the only guy who ever did work for him but he made me manager, and that was my first foray into realizing that I never wanted to be in charge for any reason.
And this was when you were at the barista place?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. At the key, I called it was like a cart, I guess, more than anything. It was in the mall. It sat right in the middle of the mall. It really was a neat job. I mean, it was kind of a bygone era, early 90s. So I was talking about this with my girlfriend. We were talking about Stranger Things or something. These shows that are trying to capture the vibe of the 80s in particular. But it's like I was explaining to her, when it comes to pop culture, you have to wait for the first couple of years of a decade to go by before you truly finally arrive in that decade. So like 1980 and 1981 were more like the 70s because they were still hanging on. And then 82 hit, and that was kind of to me like the official start of the 80s. And it was the same with the 90s. Like I graduated from high school in 1991. 90 and 91 were still like the last years of the 80s. And then in 92, that's when grunge took over everything and everything kind of changed and the 90s arrived. So it's kind of like that. It almost takes new decades a couple years to settle in. But
what about new centuries? Because I kind of feel like we don't really know what to call the current century that we're in or the decades that we're in. Are we supposed to call it the 20s?
No, because the 20s, I think maybe the separation is the now 20s and the roaring 20s. Because we lived through, I didn't live through, but very few people who are alive actually lived through the roaring 20s. They'd be in centenarians, but some of them were children back then. I don't know. I have a hard time referencing the first decade of this century.
Yeah.
When you want to reference something that happened in 2007, you can't say the 90s or the 80s. And I just always say the aughts, but then it's just like, yeah, but that could be like, I guess anything that would be, but people still get what I mean. So, but then when I'm writing, it's like, how do you spell that? How do you put the aughts?
Yeah. And then I've heard people just say the 2000s. Yeah,
but again, that could reference anything within 2000. That could be like 2077. Something hasn't even happened yet. It could be.
Yeah. And I've also heard on the news them say post 9/11, in this post 9/11 world.
Oh, I won't do that.
Yeah. I think that's a little too broad.
Because they've scrubbed out the whole before Christ and after death thing now. I mean,
right. We talked about that, I think.
Yeah, we've moved into this time where theologians have been replaced by science so strongly that they object to the coming of a religious figure. So we got rid of that, and now we're supposed to recognize something that happened, after on a world scale. Again, to me, just it doesn't. I'm not going to go like B 9/11, A 9/11. That's not going to happen to me. It's just. Because I remember after that happened, there was kind of a question about when is it okay to sort of start referencing certain things again? When will we have put this behind us enough that we can actually start? Because right away there was like an episode of The Simpsons that happened at the Twin Towers, and they pulled that off the air, and there were TV shows that had the Twin Towers and the background in the beginning or something, New York City, so they pulled those. I mean, I just remember it was so sensitive in the beginning. And to me, I thought that was a really wrong thing to do. I just thought that was really like, why? We need to, that's like having someone die and then removing all the pictures of them from your house. We need to acknowledge that these buildings were there and then they weren't for whatever reason that two planes hit them, but some people think bombs went off, and there's lots of other theories. And, again, I don't blame people for not trusting the official narrative ever. So whatever happened, we know a lot of people died, but I don't think we can just, when you're like my girlfriend's cat just died and she's absolutely devastated. I mean, it's the first animal that she ever really had. And she's even told me when I met her a couple of years ago, she's like, oh, when that happens, I'm just going to be, and sadly the day has come sooner than both of us wanted. I mean, the cat was 12 or 13, so it lived quite a while, but I don't think the last thing she's going to do now is go through and delete every photograph that she has of her cat that is now deceased. Right. I think if anything, she's going to cherish those memories because she can't take any more pictures of her cat. So I don't understand why people do the things that they do sometimes, but we all deal with grief differently. It's just, I don't think anybody polled society when they pulled like the episode of The Simpsons, because it's just that nothing happens. The buildings don't blow up or come down. It's not, it's just an episode of The Simpsons where the Twin Towers in a cartoon representation happen to, an animated representation of the Twin Towers. Homer happens to like get a parking ticket at the base of one of them or something like that. And it's a funny deal, but at the time it was like, nope, got to pull it from the airwaves. I don't think anybody was pulled. I think they just did it because they didn't want to field phone calls. So anyway, enough of that.
Yeah, it was just a very somber, like you said, it was just a very somber mood when that happened. And I didn't know anybody personally that was affected by it. But I am always fascinated on how many people today are on programs and they'll say, oh, I lost my dad or I lost whatever. I mean, there were so many people impacted by that. I would say that every American was probably impacted by that event, not directly, but to some degree indirectly.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think one of the things about it is that it's so sensational because it's being viewed by the world.
It was on live television.
Again, no offense to anybody that says post 9/11, pre 9/11, but to me, it not being a big enough event. I mean, you're talking about the theaters of World War II, for example. Millions of people were killed in those endeavors for, lots of different countries and hundreds of thousands of our, if you want to call them our people, people living in the United States who fought for the United States side of the war. But we're not seeing any of that. There were black and white reels from.
It was delayed.
Yeah, but there was a sterilization that undoubtedly occurred before they arrived in movie theaters, where you'd watch the panels that were, narrated, and it was all very propagandist.
Mm-hmm.
But here we're watching this unfold in live television, color, TV, obviously, satellite, cable. You got it from every angle you can, those kinds of things. So I think it was a whole different deal as far as that was concerned. The radio, the thing I remember, I was doing music radio at the time. I was a disc jockey in a format that I have no business doing, but they kind of coaxed me into doing it because I was still a baby in the industry and said, well, you should probably do this for experience. And because they needed somebody. So I agreed. But I just remember my general manager, every single radio and television station, pretty much, unless you were cable and you were, didn't have news, like if you were Lifetime or something like that, you were probably still showing the movie of the week with Mackenzie Phillips or, somebody from the Facts of Life, Mrs. Garrett gets the girls back together. It's like, okay, I guess I can dip out on the whole 9/11 coverage if I want to and watch this because it's just all programmed. They don't have anybody to really feed. They don't have anything to feed in there except for just that stuff. But every station on the planet, radio, television, all went to coverage of the 9/11 events. They all went to coverage of what was going on. And the station I was working for did for several hours. But then in the noontime, and I was middays, so right about what would have been halfway through my shift or nearing halfway through my shift, our general manager made the call, we're going back to music, and you're going back on the air with the music. And I was absolutely livid at him for making that call, which I did not agree with. I felt like, this is a time when everybody is going to want news on the subject. They're going to want to know the latest. There's so many questions, if you remember, when it happens, certainly the who's responsible and is there anything else that's going on we don't know about. And so to me, it was a terrible decision. It was a dreadful decision in general. But then to make it look like, 'cause every station that we worked, the market we were in, had gone to coverage wall to wall of it. And so we're the only ones that are pumping out this dreck music. And I have to be, at the console. And so I'm, public enemy number one. I'm thinking for anybody who is like, what the hell?
Was it a country radio station?
Yeah, it was.
Oh, no. That's like pouring gasoline on the fire.
Well, in all fairness to the guy who made the call, I did have a few calls that afternoon that were like, I'm glad that you guys are playing music because I'm sick of it already, or there's nothing we can do about it, or this makes me feel better, or this gives me a sense of normalcy, or whatever it may have been. Here's what it is. I was just talking about 9/11 a couple nights ago with my girlfriend, and some of those interesting things that you hear that you wonder if this is true or not. But there's it's not part of the official story. But there were certainly a lot of other stories that were told by civilians, and this one had to do with Shanksville, actually. But I don't want to get into that because, like I said, conspiracy theories never go anywhere. I have no proof. If I was somewhere, like if I had been there and seen something or knew something, I'd be the first one to say something probably because I'd say, look, I have firsthand knowledge, so I'm going to share it. I don't have firsthand knowledge of any of that, so I have no idea
good on
the
you.
whys or the wheres or anything, so I just avoid that because it's too...
I agree, because anybody can make up anything or interpretation or whatever it is, and I agree with that.
But I do think it's, like we've talked about recently in other departments, I do think it's important for people to question everything that they're told. We live, sadly, in a time where we can't trust, in my opinion, we can't trust the official narrative because we just don't ever know what the purposes are for. Well, I went down to the park today to take a walk, and they're working on the trail. They're paving it, but they put some signs out that said it's closed way ahead of wherever they were working, because you can't see the whole trail. Obviously, it takes some bends along the river. And it's not like me to do, but I was like, I'll be damned to the signs. I'm walking. I walked past the signs. It's not like they were razor wire barrier or anything. It was just 2 signs, trails closed. I want my walk, so I'm at least going to walk down here until I see equipment, and then I'll turn around and go back. And it got me to thinking about the number of times that we see, because again, my girlfriend had also never seen Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and we just watched that too. So perfect example. The barricades go up. The official story is a train derails and there's a dangerous gas in the air. And what is it? No, the elitists want to shut off 99% of the world from seeing a magnificent event that could remarkably change their perception of everything that they've come to know. So again, those barricades go up, and a lot of times they are just guys on hard hats doing work, and they don't, it's a liability. They don't want you down there. You get hurt. But there's always that time out of 1,000, out of 100, out of 10 where you don't know what those sons of bitches are doing behind those signs. They put those signs up, and we're just supposed to stay out. And it's troubling, but at the same time, I was thinking about how much I get it, because I report on that stuff now. And like we have wildfires here in the state, and they'll close highways, or they'll close highways for the season because of inclement weather or snow, when they stop removing snow on certain passes. And people will run the barricades. People will literally go past the barricades now. And I just think, what an idiot. But then there's that part of me that also goes, Jack, remember, just because they put up a sign that says road closed, stay the hell out, doesn't mean what's going on back there is really what they say is going on back there. Because we live in a world where it's mendacity reigns supreme. They lie to us constantly. So who sent you? So I don't blame anybody for that. I don't blame anybody for always questioning, always question. And I don't think that it's rude personally, and I don't think that it's offensive even when people are dead. In fact, I think that our attentions should be especially drawn to events where people are harmed or killed when it comes to that. So I don't make any apologies for making suppositions about, I wonder if it was because ... or I wonder if so-and-so was involved. You don't like me for that? I'm sorry, but I think we need to ask those questions, and it's a good thing for us to say, are we really going to swallow every single thing that we've been told by an entity that is known for timelessly, repeatedly, shoving lies down every orifice in our body? I'm not, but...
What were they doing on the trail, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I never got as far as even seeing any equipment, because I just walked. There's a bend in the road where you can't see the trail that's pretty significant, and it's down where we call them the marmots. It's like the French.
Oh, that's right, the marmots.
The marmots are down there, but they're all hibernating now. So they've all gone to bed now. But I just wanted to go down because sometimes you'll get like a late napper. You'll get like a late season marmot that's down there. So I just walked down to the rocks, and I didn't hear a peep, though. I didn't hear a sound. And for all I know, you know what? There were a couple of guys around the corner who were, looking for loose scales from the lizard man that was seen getting out of the drain a couple nights ago or 2 weeks back.
I wonder where those went.
But no, I didn't see anything down there. They're supposed to be doing some trail maintenance, paving it, some other things. So can I not be on the trail and just watch for equipment? I don't see any. But
you know what they were you were going to run into this guy.
You're not that guy, pal. Trust me. You're not that guy.
Have you seen that video on YouTube yet?
No. What is that?
Oh, my gosh. I wish I would have known about that video when we were talking about the impacts that COVID-19 had on our lives, because I have a feeling that it was a video that somebody recorded of a man in like a Walgreens. Didn't have a mask on, whatever. And the guy who he was talking to was like saying, hey, could you give me some space or something like that? And he immediately just turned on him. And it became not only fighting words, but also a hill too far. He was going to take a stand against the man, and he just kept saying,
You're not that guy, pal. Trust me. You're not that guy.
Wow.
Yeah.
And he was the aggressor in the
He was
incident,
clearly
I
the
think.
aggressor, because the guy who was behind the camera, who, we always want to say is the innocent victim, but the guy who was behind the camera was like, hey, sorry, man, yeah. And he just kept going and going and going. And then I think there was some kind of a body gesture regarding his groin region, and that's what you get for voting for this guy. So, yeah. It was interesting. I'll have to send it to you.
Well, again, I think we got people running barricades that say, stop, warning, hazard, do not enter, danger, and a variety of other things that go along with it because, yes, people are idiots because this kind of stuff never used to happen. That's what I think maybe younger listeners need to understand. 20 years ago, if you put up a roadblock or the DOT put up barriers that said road closed, do not enter. You didn't enter, and no one did. That was just it. Nobody ran the barricades.
Nobody
ever.
questioned it.
And now, every time I talk to the DOT, it seems like about a project that's large enough where they don't want people running the barriers because they say that it is hazardous to them, and they are working in there. And, if we're to believe that they're not extricating a UFO again or something.
Yeah.
People are running the barriers. And so I just think, what does this go to?
Entitlement.
I think your first thought goes to things like entitlement, lawlessness. My brain certainly does. But then I also think, you know what, Jack? I think people are just absolutely sick and tired of being told what to do. And we're coming off of, I think maybe it's a backlash from the pandemic where we're just, the over governance of people becomes so pronounced, and really that was probably not as intrusive as it could have been had they started ticketing us for not wearing masks or forcing us in some way. It became Gattaca, you must get vaccinated or, you don't get your social security number gets wiped out. I don't know what
you go to the Matrix. Yeah, no, I think that when it reached that level, it almost became like a joke. And it was like, well, what are you going to do to him? Well, we don't know. But we're going to do something. And then one of my coworkers was actually asking me about this today. They're like, how did they come up with the 6 feet thing? And I was like, I don't know. It sounds kind of like one of those army training videos from the 1940s where it's just 6 feet. It just sounds like a good number. So just maintain 6 feet and don't question.
Yeah. I know every epidemiologist in the world is going to sling mud at whatever he's listening on right now for this remark. But can you imagine if they'd have only had the 6 feet rule during the bubonic plague? How many lives would have been saved if they would have just hung out 6 feet apart from each other when the Black Death was going around Europe? It would have been more like the Gray Death.
Yes.
Let's face it. It would have
been a gray area.
And again, it's easy to take shots in retrospect because sometimes this is what's scary. This is the scariest thought to me, and it's probably the most true. Are there some things that I believe we've been lied to about because they are seemingly schemes that are entirely fictitious and highly malevolent in so many ways? Yes, I think so. I think we've been the victim collectively of a number of those. I think there are some that go on in our world every single day, quite frankly, that just perpetuate. Is the more likely scenario when some of these things unfold, i.e. the pandemic, that we're truly just that lost in the instance of something happening just like that we really don't know what the fuck to do. I think that's the scarier part of the whole thing because right. I think you're right. I think someone who probably had a white coat and a couple diplomas on the wall, but for whatever reason just said, 6 feet, yes, they need to stay 6 feet apart. It's very important that 6 feet is kept at all times because they got to come up with something to tell us.
Well, and that white coat syndrome, I feel, can go a lot of different ways. But I think we have a tendency when someone is wearing said white coat to believe everything that they say. Oh, he has a white coat on. He must, I mean, even the pharmacist wears a white coat. Have you noticed that? So
yes, and the helpers all wear blue at the pharmacy.
Yeah, the helper wears blue, and the pharmacist, the person who has to consult you about what the drugs will do to you if you do not use them correctly. Please stand in that line over there, sir, and the pharmacist will be with you in a minute. And so then over comes the person in the little white coat, and they say, don't rail this because you might actually bleed from your nose and your eyeballs if you do that. So
it's a very Santa's workshop thing they have going on at the pharmacy.
It is, isn't it? Like all the elves are over there filling the pills. And they're always in the middle of grocery stores now. Have you noticed that? They're always kind of associated with grocery stores.
Yeah, my pharmacy's in a grocery store.
Yeah.
And all of the personnel have changed in the last 2 months, too. Like, everybody's gone that used to be there, and now there's a whole new crew. And I'm thinking, oh, God, did I get the right drugs for those last couple of years when the other people were working there? Truly, like, everybody's gone. They're whole different people now. But, yeah, I mean, who knows in all of this? There are just some things I think you have to come back to every day or try to get through the experience and look at, again, we try to concentrate on those things that we always say are of higher mind or higher principle. And, it's tough though, when your chain's being yanked constantly and, you can't really trust who's speaking to you from the highest authority. But I think that's just probably always been the case. I mean, because the highest authority's number one job is to stay in the highest authority. They have to remain there.
That's rule number one.
That is. It's rule number one.
You must stay. Yeah, but anyway. I get it. And, I think it also kind of comes down to our sense of security. And I know this is going to be kind of taking it a little step further, but we have a tendency to do that on these episodes, don't we? I think it has a tendency to be our sense of security and how safe are we really. And I was remembering that when you were talking about some mail that I received the other day. It was unsolicited. It was a notice in the mail saying that there was part of my identity or part of my personal information. It wasn't stolen, but there was a data breach, and we've all seen those. Potentially compromised, fill in the adjective, whatever, And so I think that to some degree there is that kind of the rolling of the dice in life. And you really don't know where your personal information is. And I think that this isn't really a new idea, because there was a time when if you had to go and get somebody's information, it was in a filing cabinet at the county courthouse. And you had to go and maybe pay a fee so that they could make a copy of it for you. And then you could get it. And then, you would have access to that information because it was, quote, public information, right? So we have some information that is personal information, but I kind of feel like all information is public information anymore because of how wired and connected our world is.
Well, and there's just so much that's known, I suppose, about you too. There's just so many ways to dig dirt on somebody. There's also just only so many things you can know about a person, though, too. And the trail used to start, and I would guess that it still does, with your social security number. But see, here's another one of those brilliant examples of something that in hindsight looks like a scheme to inject us all with a chip. We're all just being labeled as a number now. I'm no longer John Smith or, Jack Hansen with some unique middle name or some unique address or some, there may be 1,000 other John Smiths in the world, but I'm John Smith at 218 Elmview Avenue, Cincinnati, Ohio. God damn it.
Right.
And now you're turning me into a number. No, the idea was when the Social Security system was rolled out, it was a numerated system so that you would receive benefits at the end of the years that you worked. I mean, if I don't know the whole history of the Social Security system, but also basically I think it's important for people to know that historically the Social Security system was not designed so that you could work for X number of years and then suddenly not work any longer, because when the system was developed, when it was time for you to not work any longer because your hands had arthritis, you were so old that you couldn't drive the bus anymore, you were already living in a household with several generations more than likely, and they would take care of you until you passed away.
Right.
So, again, it's really easy to let the actual happenings of our timeline sneak up on us to the point where we look back and then say, well, it was entirely something else. And it's not. It's kind of like, and I hate to say this as much as any broadcaster of my veteran status, but the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, was created with the best intentions in mind. The idea was we need to make sure that this product stays free and uncontaminated by anybody that might wish to have their own schemes attached to it for capital gain. Then, of course, we live in a capitalist system, so it immediately gets turned upside down because here comes the ads for, chock full of nuts coffee and
right,
like everything else. So it's kind of counterintuitive, but really the Federal Communications Commission was designed to protect the integrity of both radio and television. What's being disseminated is, first of all, it's valid 100%. It's true and honest and forthright in the best possible way. And it's designed for the purposes of entertaining or informing you. But it doesn't take long for, of course, it's like the internet. Maybe it was squeaky clean for a week even before the next thing you know, boom, here comes the first scammer or the first naked pictures of, dick pics that come out or whatever it is. I mean, did you know, too, just to quickly change the subject, did you know, because my girlfriend and I, as we already have established, have this large age gap between us. But she went to a bridal shower, not over last weekend here, a couple of nights ago. And somebody was there. It's the first time I'd heard this name. There's so many, her family has so many friends. It's just crazy. But somebody was there who's about 60 years old now, a little older than me. And their husband died recently, and he was like 80-something. And so their gap is similar to the gap that I have with my girlfriend. And so this woman was talking to my girlfriend about, aren't older men just the best? And, they know so much more, and there's so much, all this stuff. So they were having that conversation. But she shared with my girlfriend that she's apparently kind of going wild and having these oats, now that whoever it was, old Joe, is passed off. So she's 60-something and on Tinder or whatever. Did you know guys who are like 80 years old, 70s, 80s, are sending dick pics? Did you know that?
I didn't.
That just deflated me to know. And I was like, oh, my God, you have to be kidding me. I thought this was something that was relegated only to morons, only to these horrible, like, alpha male wannabes and stuff that are in the millennial camp and younger. Like, really, 80-year-old men are like, hey, have a look at this. And I was, oh, God,
You're not that guy, pal. Trust me. You're not that guy.
Yeah, you're not that guy.
You're not that guy, pal.
When will women learn that, or when will men learn, get it through their heads, the smaller one or the bigger one, let alone both, that women are not interested in seeing your penis? They don't want to see it. Even women that have been with the same penis for 40 years are like, I'll pass on seeing your penis tonight, Earl, because they don't. Penises are not interesting. Penises are not fun to look at. No one wants to see a foreign penis. I'm sure there are some women out there who are oversexed and really are into the whole, like, lining up penises, pictures, things, but very few of them, very few. Every woman I've ever known, I think, would qualify for it. No, don't send me a dick pic. Just stop.
Yeah, no, I actually did some reading on this. I did some research a long time ago.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I won't tell you kind of how I got into this vein, but you know me, my mind wanders. And,
nice pun. That vein, huh? How big was the vein?
It was big. So I got to this point where I was doing some research, and it was talking about the differences between women and their view of sex and men's view of sex. Men are very visual, is what it said. And so we see something and we want it, right? So we're very visual. We're visual sex drive beings. Women, on the other hand, it said, are more, I wasn't really paying attention, so I can't remember what it said. No, I think
there were no pictures.
Right, exactly. There wasn't a picture book. So it said that women are more kind of psychological in their form of intimacy. So they're more on a connection on another level than just visual. And so I think that's kind of where the difference is. And a lot of times you've got these, adult videos that are portraying, these different scenarios and these different things that, women are supposed to like. Well, they're from the perspective of a man. Right. I don't think there is really a huge group of women in the pornographic film industry. And so I don't think they're then saying, okay, this is how we're going to do this shot and then we're going to do this shot here. No, I think a lot of it is male driven. And so there you go. I don't think that answers your question, but those were the two. Well, no,
that's an interesting insight. Effeminate pornography, by the way, would be like, not that the videos last this long, but it'd probably be 55 minutes of cuddling and 5 minutes of actually something else, and then the movie'd be over. You know what I mean?
I don't even know that it would be the something else. It would probably be...
It's just all the cuddling, right?
It would probably be like a Hallmark movie, and it would just be a constant evolving storyline, and it all kind of centers around happiness and living happily ever after. It would be a Hallmark movie, I think.
Well, just for what it's worth, look, I have no shame in the equipment in the body that I was given. So I don't feel any shame attached to my own penis or anything like that. But I will say this: unless you are already sexually intimate with a person, sending them a picture of your penis is vulgar.
Yeah,
it's vulgar, and I don't label too many things as vulgar, but to me, it's a vulgar act. And it's not because it's not just, boy, it's a penis. We've all seen one before. Look at this one. It's interesting. It's got this, this one's a little shorter or a little rounder. It's just it's what's behind it. It's just the dough-headed, just, let me, do you want me now kind of things. It's like, man, you are way off base. I don't know if there's ever been a man alive that's gotten any because he sent a woman that he didn't know a picture of his dinghy.
Now, see,
but the thing is something different?
Well, I think that it could be a different scenario. If a man was sending another man that form of message. Now, see, we're going back to what the research said, which is men are visual. And so then I think maybe in other communities in society, that might be something that is a little more prevalent. I don't know.
I think we just have to stick to strictly heterosexual terms here.
Okay. That's how you started on it.
I just know it's so pervasive, and it's a generational thing too. Like if you in my generation, and I would imagine this is the same for yours as well, but in my generation as a 20-something in the 90s, the early 90s, if you wanted to give a woman a dick pic, you had to take a photograph of your penis with a Polaroid camera and shake the thing, and then go hand it to her at Denny's when she's working the late shift, or put it in the mailbox.
That's
or send
the key.
It to
you had to get a Polaroid because we all know
they wouldn't develop
it.
I take that back. Because my brother worked at a grocery store, and the guy who ran the photo map part of the grocery store was a great guy. His name was Steve, and he had a collection and a half of things you never wanted to see in your life, and maybe a few that you actually kind of did if you were a dog-ass man in some ways. he had a collection of naked pictures and all kinds of stuff you wouldn't believe, but they wouldn't give them back to you because,
Right.
of course, that's aiding and facilitating pornographic images. The store would get in trouble if they were publishing your dick pics and giving them back to you.
Or exchanging money for publishing said.
Yeah, there's all kinds of trouble there. But the difference is just because my girlfriend and I had frequented this one establishment for a time, and she had told me at one point along the way, oh, yeah, I just realized it took us a while to go there because it'd been some years, but she said, yeah, that guy who works up there, you know that guy? I'm like, yeah. She said, yeah, I just put two and two together. He's a guy, he like stalked me on Facebook for a while when I was when I was a teenager. I was like 16 and he was, you know, like all over me and hey, baby. And I'm like, oh boy, you know, I just rolled my eyes. And then like it took months later, it came up again. And she just nonchalantly just said, you know, oh, yeah, I mean, I remember when, you know, that guy. I'm like, oh, yeah, I remember you told me about him. He's like, yeah, I mean, sending me dick pics and stuff. I'm just like, whoa, hold on a second. Like, you didn't say that.
There's more to the story.
She was like, oh, yeah, Jack, he did that too. Like, of course, like that's part of the deal. It was just so normal to her. It was just like
that was the exchange.
When men decide they're going to target you on Facebook or on social media, that goes with the territory. See, now to me, coming from, and I'm not a violent person at all. I mean, I'm non-confrontational to the core, believe it or not. But, you know, your first reflex is I'm going to go up there and, you know, get there and tell this guy but then I just think to myself, Jack, think about the generation.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the generation we're talking about. And, you know, you really just have to live with the fact that happens. I mean, like literally all anybody would need because for that matter to do it to me, because I'm sadly on at least one social media platform. I mean, even our listeners could send us those kinds of pics if they wanted to. We're only a click away like everybody is. So like that to me, that's why it's a really vulgar act. And it also really, I don't know, kind of takes some of the majesty away from the penis because in our world, there's a shame, you know, the Western theology is always attached to shame to, especially the sexual organs.
Mm-hmm.
And so the only penises that were kind of allowed to be seen in public were these very humble, I guess you could say, examples that are attached to statuary that's ancient, like Michelangelo's David and stuff like that. You can see his winky, that's fine. He's been bronzed and there's no problem with that. So the penis kind of had a majesty to itself that was hidden. There was sort of a cloak and dagger penis thing going on. And now all these pics are floating around. And I mean, and here's the thing. If I couldn't honestly tell you one penis from another unless it was pretty incredible, I wouldn't imagine in some way, shape, or form. It was a remarkable dick. But I don't want pictures of my penis floating around in cyberspace either. I don't want, like, you know, because I remember, I mean, I was never promiscuous as a young man, but I remember when that was backed up, when I walked into a bar, because my friend was all about, you know, getting with lots of girls and stuff, and he loved to use me as a wingman because I was funny and decent looking, and so he would always, you know, he'd come with me, Jack. I'm like, I'll sit there and amuse you for a while. But I remember walking into a bar and sitting down next to a table of 4 women and overhearing a conversation they were having about a guy that I knew. He wasn't a friend of mine, but I knew who this guy was. They'd all had sex with him and they'd all seen his penis and they were all talking about his penis in graphic detail. And they were all laughing at his penis, I might add, and how ridiculous it was and how poorly he used it. And I was like, you see, this is why I made the decision, even before stepping into the camp of being a young man who's out in the world free and can do whatever he wants, not to just march my penis into anybody that it wants to, because this is what happens. So,
you know, I was going to start this segment by saying, do you know where your personal information is? But now I think I need to say, do you know where your dick pic is?
I mean, come on, admittedly, I've never taken one for any purposes.
Me neither.
I mean, yeah, why would you do that?
I think there's a threshold that people cross over mentally when they're like, okay, I want to film myself doing this. And I kind of feel like it's the same train of thought. Are you with me on that, or am I off base?
Yeah. No, I don't know that I would make that sweeping generalization of every dick pictographer, but I would say that, yeah, there's probably something to that for enough of them that you could make a case that there's some kind of it's this oversaturation of external stimuli is what it is. It's this thing that we're doing right now. It's all of this audio and video and pictures and interaction that goes on online. It's this internet that the Hopi, predicted would cover the landscape one day and be part of the Koyaanisqatsi, be part of the problem and not the solution because of how it was being utilized. It's technology that really we have no business possessing because look at what we do with it by and large. I mean, there are some good things going on online, I'm sure, but 9/10 of the stuff that's out there, I don't know that it does much good for anybody. And I would argue that half of it's probably bad for us because even though, again, I don't feel that there's any shame attached to human sexuality or the act of sex, I think pornography is absolutely rampant, overly rampant in our society today. And there is something that is distressing about its effects on especially young people, because young people are being raised with an entirely different and I think very unhealthy attitude and viewpoint about
expectation.
That. Yeah. And so it's not good for us because remember this Hollywood thing and this advertising thing. Hollywood and advertising go hand in hand for two reasons. Hollywood is sensational because it's just built to be that way. It's the story that, you can't tell because you're not this extraordinary. It's escapism to the finest degree. It's King Kong, a giant gorilla, grabbing a beautiful blonde girl and holding her hostage in a left hand on the top of the Empire State Building while, the Red Baron tries to shoot bullets at it. It's fantasy. It's fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the advertisers come in, that's when it really gets bad because their whole idea is to package that fiction so it appears to be the norm that everyone else is living except for you. And therefore you are inadequate. And so your dick pics don't look as good because, well, first of all, obviously you're not using Mr. Schlong's,
Yeah.
Buy Mr. Schlong's powder and you'll get harder and you'll get longer and thicker and she'll look. And then the camera people roll out. Your dick pics are terrible. You're actually a lot bigger than you think, but you're using the wrong film. You're using the wrong camera. Buy the Kodak. Kodak. Buy our Kodak 1000.
Take this non-FDA approved medicine.
Here they come, and all of a sudden, no one's adequate anymore. I'm not good enough, and my poor little dick and its pics are inadequate just the same. So there's always that overarching theme, it seems like. And that's been created by the overproliferation of pornography, even though apparently, now my girlfriend was telling me this too, and she would know because, she's a Gen Zer, and so she's all over the internet and, TikTok and those things. Apparently the big, huge new thing, because I'm strangely enough not on X Hamster or anything like very often. So, or what's the Pornhub, right?
Yeah,
because I'm always looking for a hub, if it has hub in the title, I'm there.
You mean the Tic Tacs? You're talking about the Tic Tacs, right?
She tells me that the realistic, homemade porn is the big sell. That's what everybody's watching. Is the one that is being filmed in the college dorm room between the boyfriend and girlfriend and stuff like that. It's not the professional stuff.
The fans only kind of stuff. Yeah.
Maybe we're evolving in that regard. As long as it's taxable, that's always the big deal because that's the thing with prostitution. Prostitution has long had this trail of theoretical morality that follows it around. Oh, prostitution isn't legal because it's immoral to practice because it's just wrong for a woman to sell herself for sex. And yet, as long as it's in a pornographic film industry where the studio has a registered trademark and they have a business license and they can track every fucking thing that they do and tax it,
and they have
it's
insurance.
fine. So that's always been the stickler with prostitution. it's not taxable. Women can literally go to an apartment complex and they can visit, because they're women and not men who only get, like one snapshot for their dick pic for the night and then they're done. They can't deliver anymore. They can literally visit apartment A, apartment B, apartment C, apartment D. They can visit 26 apartments and collect $50 from every single John in there and walk out of there with $1,300, and Uncle Sam never knows the wiser. Uncle Sam doesn't like that. That doesn't fly with the IRS. The IRS has their own dick pic, and they will jam it up your ass quickly when they discover that you're not paying your taxes. So that's the thing with prostitution as to why it's always been, and probably always will be, illegal to some regard, because they can't figure out how to regulate and tax it. Same thing with marijuana. Marijuana is finally coming into vogue in certain states that are legalizing it and it's regulated to death. I know somebody who is an accountant who does the accounting for a pot shop in a town that's not too far away from here where we live. And she said the stacks of cash are incredible, but she literally, it's like Daffy Duck shit. Like when he's got the stacks of money. I'm a happy miser. I'm selling pot. But she said then she takes one hand and literally shoves half of it over to one side of the table, because that's where it goes for taxes. So in the 60s, it's, again, this morality follows around marijuana, and people say, oh, it's wrong because it gets you high, and it's, fuck, alcohol makes you, like, probably I would argue, like Father Bill, good old Bill Hicks used to say, I've never known an angry pothead in my life, but I've known a bunch of angry drunks. And he's right. And so, again, the morality of marijuana and the effects of smoking it, nothing to do with why it wasn't legal and still isn't in a lot of states or federally at all. Has to do with the fact that they need to be able to regulate and tax it. Once that happens, they don't give a fuck what we do with ourselves. We can go hog wild, kill ourselves, shoot each other, as long as the tax dollars are rolling in. That's what they care about. So again, if you don't think there's a they behind these equations, you're wrong. There is. And that tax man is definitely one of them, because people rake the benefits of that in, for sure.
Oh man, that was
good.
Almost
Marlboro almost had a marijuana cigarette in production in the 60s. It's a fact. You can look up the story. It's a fascinating story. Taxation was the problem. The federal government was like, nah, we can't figure out how to regulate the growing of marijuana because it's an illegal crop. It has been for a while. It's been California's biggest cash crop for like 70 years. Long before it was ever legalized there, it was already their biggest cash crop. And they have a lot of big cash crops, by the way. But man, you talk about money. Marijuana is where it's at in this day and age. And Oregon's going to legalize psilocybin soon. I was told Colorado already did. I wasn't aware of that, but because my girlfriend suffers from anxiety and is really sensitive to synthetic medications, and so she looks to dose with things that are more natural. And she's talked about microdosing psilocybin mushrooms, which basically means you take them, but you don't take enough of them to have a trip. It just has an impact on your brain chemistry, because apparently the effects of, I've tried THC like tinctures and things. I just don't smoke marijuana. I just never have. It's just one of those things that I just don't feel like I want to do still. But I've tried the tinctures that have the hemp and, those make me feel awful. I can't stand the ones that I've used of those. But I understand that psilocybin mushrooms for panic sufferers and stuff, miracle cure for some people. So, hey, why not? And like Father Bill also used to say, Bill Hicks, my favorite comedian of all time, my favorite person, I think, of all time in a famous capacity. He used to say, so, it's here when we get here. It's already growing out of the ground, and yet that's illegal. But the stuff that the giant billion-dollar pharmaceutical companies are making that are killing thousands of people, millions with the opioids and things like that, that's totally legal. In fact, there's cartoon animals selling them to me on TV right now. Something backward in that equation. So
what do you think the IRS form number would be for the prostitution?
Oh, that there's an old 6ix9ine joke in there, I'm sure.
6ix9ine.
Yeah, I don't know. I need a form. Need to form DCK 6969 or something like that.
Can you imagine going to H&R Block or fill in the blank, and you've got all the little accountants there, and you've got all the people coming in with their shoe boxes, and little Marge says, "Yeah, we're gonna need a DXXX 6969 form over here, please." Everybody turns.
And bring the camera. We need visual evidence to attach too.
This is for all the lonely people. A lot of lonely people out there.
I think we need Randy Newman for whatever reason. That low, lonely It's literally every Randy Newman song. I just like.
So true, so true. What are we listening to today?
Oh, this is Crimson Glory. These guys are from Florida. They go back to my high school days. Good stuff.
All right, until we meet again, Jack Hansen.
Look forward to it, Michael Elliott.
Well, it looks like Jack and Michael have finished up their latest chat about all things existence. But if anything they said got your own existence brewing, be sure and catch their other talks at existencebrewing.com and drop them an email to share your thoughts using contact@existencebrewing.com.
Existence Brewing.